Welcome to the channel, and my name is Oblivion. In today's FEH Report, we cover the topic of Powercreep in Fire Emblem Heroes. Powercreep is a large topic to discuss in one video, so today's video will cover the topics of what is Powercreep, what causes Powercreep, and why is Powercreep so prevalent in Fire Emblem Heroes. If you already know what Powercreep is and don't want to recap, go ahead and jump to the next section, but for anyone who doesn't, let's explain it. The strict definition of Powercreep is when something new in a game is released, and it is better than an existing thing in every single way. But over time, the connotation or the meaning of Powercreep has gotten a more loose definition, where essentially it means anything that comes out that is super powerful and more powerful than what already exists, even if it's not better in every single way. In Fire Emblem Heroes, there are essentially three types of Powercreep: stat creep, preference weapon creep, and skill creep. To explain these three different types of power creep, let's do a quick example. We are going to compare OG Ike, who released in 2017, versus Fallen Ike, who released in 2020. For the sake of the example, we will not consider Resplendent stats or the Ragnar Refined. First, let's start with stat creep. Here we have original Ike, with no Resplendent stats: 42 HP, 35 attack, 31 speed, 32 defense, 18 resistance. And here we have Fallen Ike, 40 HP, 35 attack, 42 speed, 32 defense, and 23 resistance. Now technically OG Ike still has 2 more HP, but we'll look past that for right now. As you can see, Fallen Ike has either equal or more stats almost everywhere. Fallen Ike's base stat total, which is what you get when you add all the stats together, is 172, 14 points higher than original Ike's BST, which is 158. As you can see, newer units have higher base stat total than older units, and this is one way in which power creep is introduced into Fire Emblem Heroes. Historically, these BST power creeps happen every year with the Choose Your Legends banner. Next, let's look at preference weapon power creep. So let's look at OG Ike's preference weapon, Ragnar. All it has is this encounter, that's it. But Fallen Ike's preference weapon, Chaos Ragnar, has this encounter plus an Omni Unity effect. So Chaos Ragnar is strictly better because it has an additional effect over OG Ike's weapon. This is what we call preference weapon power creep. While originally preference weapons typically had 1 to 2 effects, over time that has drastically increased, so now newer weapons tend to be more powerful. Lastly, let's look at skill power creep. So if we continue the example with the 2 Ikes, we can look at base Ike, who comes with Ether, and Fallen Ike, who comes with Mayhem Ether. They both have the exact same effect of treating the foe's defense or resistance as if it was reduced by 50% and restoring 50% of the damage done as HP, but Mayhem Ether has 1 less cooldown, so once again it is strictly better. Now this is an example of preference skill power creeping a standard skill. So let's do one more example, but with 2 standard skills. So here we have Swift Sparrow 2 and Swift Sparrow 3. Swift Sparrow 2, released in 2017, grants 4 attack and speed if the unit initiates combat, while Swift Sparrow 3, that came later, grants 6 attack and 7 speed if the unit initiates combat. Once again, we can see that Swift Sparrow 3 is strictly better than Swift Sparrow 2, and so this is another form of power creep that exists in Fire Emblem Heroes. Now Intelligent Systems does have some systems to address power creep, such as Dragonflower system and the Refinery system, but we will talk about those later in a different video, as it doesn't directly affect our current discussion. Now this is where things get more interesting. I love to analyze game systems and game design to get a better understanding of why choices are made and what choices could be made to fix problems the game is suffering from. In my opinion, there are 2 major reasons that cause power creep, particularly in Fire Emblem Heroes. One reason is interesting and the other is boring, so let's get the boring one out of the way quickly. The first reason is sales. Power creep makes money. It's honestly that simple and super boring. Powerful units sell banners, they get people summoning. If you had to ask me what were the 2 major variables to get a banner to sell, I'd say power creep and, more importantly, character popularity. And if we look historically at the sales of banners, this is typically true. It's even more true when both variables are combined together. So with that out of the way, let's get to the more interesting answer. The second answer is running out of design space. Design space is a very interesting concept that comes up a lot in games that have collectible characters or cards, or any game that has new pieces or things continually being released. Design space is a major factor in a trading card game like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's explain the concept of design space in a simplified way so everyone is on the same page. For this example, we will use the Gen 1 sword units from Fire Emblem Heroes, and we will start with Ryoma. Now if we look at Ryoma as a unit and not a character, we are essentially going to look past Ryoma's art and look at what mechanically makes him a unit. So there are 4 major aspects. First, movement type. Second, weapon type. Third, stat line. And fourth, preference weapon if the unit has one. In the future, there's a 5th variable, preference skills, but for this example, we won't look at that. So Ryoma is an infantry unit and he is a sword unit. These 2 factors determine a lot about this unit mechanically. First, it determines how many spaces he can move normally and how much BST, base stat total, he will have. Second, it determines his color. Third, a combination of these 2 variables determine what skills he can use or has access to. Fourth, his stat line is how his base stat total is distributed. So in Ryoma's case, at the time of release, he had good attack and speed, but lower resistance. And then the last factor we have, preference weapons, which in Ryoma's case, he has Raijinto, which means he has access to distant counter via his weapon. Okay, let's put Ryoma down into our infographic for design space. And now you can see Ryoma takes up the spot of a fast infantry distant counter sword. So now we want to create other units that do not fulfill the same role. So we may have Black Knight, who's also a fast distant counter sword unit, but this time he's in armor, so he takes up a different spot. Or we can have OG Ike, who's an infantry distant counter sword, but he focuses a lot more on defense, so he takes a different spot as well. And as we continually make more new sword units, the space begins to fill up, and the unit designers run out of space to make new, unique sword units. Now this happens throughout the entire game, so for every weapon type, every movement type, etc. So the question then becomes, what does a game developer do when they run out of design space? And there is essentially 3 answers. 1. Make niche units or similar units. 2. Open up more design space. 3. Power creep. Now let's start with the easiest answer to tackle, make similar units. So technically it is very difficult to run out of design space completely in a game as complex as Fire Emblem Heroes. As you can see, there's always tiny spaces between units. So technically the developer can just make units with tiny differences. Like for example, Guy, a new sword infantry unit, and he's exactly like Ryoma. He has distant counter in his weapon, he has all the same stats, except he has 1 more speed and 1 less attack. Now technically this unit is using design space, Ryoma wasn't, but people tend to frown on this. It devalues Ryoma and Guy as units, because Guy can essentially do everything Ryoma can. It makes Ryoma less unique, and it also doesn't entice people to spend money or orbs on a unit that doesn't do anything different than the existing unit already does. Now there's also the option to make super niche units. So you could create, let's say, Stefan, and Stefan has a very unique effect in his weapon. On turn 3, and only on turn 3, Stefan deals 20% true damage against red mages. Technically, once again, this is a design space not being used, but because it is such a niche, a majority of players won't want this unit. People tend to like generally powerful units that can be used in more than one very specific way, though that isn't always the case. Next, let's move on to the next major option, open more design space. This may seem like the most obvious answer, and you may be thinking Intelligent Systems is dumb for not doing this, and you would be right, but also wrong. Opening more design space can be difficult, though not always. So the question is, how does one open more design space? And there's quite a few answers in Fire Emblem Heroes. First, one of the easiest ways to open more design space is to add new weapon types. We've seen them do this before with beast units. It opens up an entirely new area to explore mechanically, and I think this is one of the most successful things Intelligent Systems has done to open design space. I would love to see them do this again with something like fist weapons. The second easiest way to open design space is to add colors to existing weapon types. Once again, we have seen them do this before, with bows, daggers, and even adding colorless tomes. Adding colors can be a great way to add differences between units so there is less overlap. I don't think this is as good as an answer as adding new weapon types, but it is effective, and the proof of that is how often Intelligent Systems has done this in the past. The third way to open more design space is to create new unit types. Once again, we have seen intelligent systems do this with legendary heroes, mythic heroes, harmonic heroes, and even duo heroes. These new unit types will typically have additional variables to differentiate them from units that exist already, which in turn opens more design space. So with legendaries, we have the stat buff from the legendary blessing, we have pair up, and additional arena scoring. Mythics do a similar thing, but in ether raids, and harmonics follow suit, but in resonant battles. Duo and harmonic units also get access to an entire another ability, which once again makes them more unique and opens up more design space. This has been Intelligent Systems' go-to option when it comes to creating design space, and it was very successful in the past. The last major option to open design space is to create new game modes. We've seen this most famously with ether raids, but it has also happened for resonant battles, Pawns of Loki, and even arena. This is by far the most difficult way to create design space, because it requires the developers to create new game modes that have different objectives and values. So for example, in Arena, all you care about is that scoring high and killing your enemy team. But in ether raids, you need to worry about destroying buildings or pots, positioning, supporting units, enacting unique strategies. The same could be said for resonant battles where your objective is to kill thieves. By creating unique and different game modes, design space is created because it allows the developer to make units that excel in specific areas that are valued in those game modes. Hopefully you're still with me and I haven't confused you too much. So let's talk about the last option, power creep. Now when you run out of design space, there's always the option to go up instead of horizontally. And this is what power creep essentially does. You take the design space a unit is already taking up and you put a unit directly on top of them. The new unit is typically better in every way, and in a sense, steals the old unit's place in the game. And that is why power creep is so damaging to a game. It removes something from the game that existed before, instead of building on top of it and making it better. So everyone who has invested in that old unit technically just had their investment devalued, which isn't good for those players. Okay, let's jump into the final topic of this FEH report, and it's going to be a big one. Why is power creep so prevalent in Fire Emblem Heroes? Once again, I believe there are two reasons for this. The first reason is a failure to open design space. Over time, Intelligent Systems has consistently failed to open design space. I want to be clear, this isn't so much at the beginning of the game. I would argue that major failures are in the more recent years. They originally did a great job opening design space with some of the things I mentioned before, like adding ether raids, introducing beasts, and adding colors to weapons. But they began to introduce game modes that failed to open design space, which is a major contributing factor. Now before I get into this, I want to make abundantly clear, just because I trash on a game mode you like, doesn't mean the game mode is bad, or you have bad taste, or anything like that. I am looking at the game mode from a game design perspective, and how well it did at opening design space. Let's start with Tap Battle. So Tap Battle is very different than anything else in FEH. It doesn't use any of the pre-existing mechanics, and therefore doesn't open up any new design space. Technically, they could make units that are better in Tap Battle, or have special effects in Tap Battle, but they have never done that, and I don't expect them to. Next, we have Relay Defense, a game mode that failed on so many fronts that it had to be removed from the game directly. Definitely didn't do anything to help it up design space. Next. Okay, let's group all the game modes that don't actually involve playing the game, or have such little gameplay that it's insignificant. So that would be Lost Lore and Frontline Phalanx. Both of these game modes are, in my opinion, complete waste of development time and money. They contribute nothing to the game whatsoever, and only offer some free rewards for clicking a couple buttons every 8 to 20 hours. They obviously did nothing to open new design space. Now this one might make people mad, but the next group of game modes are ones that do have gameplay, but the gameplay is limited to a basic map. So these are Tempest Trials, Forging Bonds, Hall of Forms, Voting Gauntlet, and Hero's Journey. Tempest Trial offers great rewards, Forging Bonds is amazing for character development and storytelling, Hall of Forms is a cool build your own character game mode, Voting Gauntlet is there to make the entire community mad, and in all honesty, I don't understand the appeal of Hero's Journey whatsoever, but I know people like it because it's cute or something. But all those game modes do not offer design space, and this is because they all revolve around killing 3 to 6 units on a map with nothing else truly mattering. I think Tempest Trials could have been a great mode for opening new design space if the difficulty was much higher, similar to the first Tempest Trial, which in my opinion is the best Tempest trial. But at the moment, no one actually plays the game mode. Everyone just auto battles to get rewards, which is unfortunate. If the mode was more difficult and required people to actually play, then skills like Renewal, S-Drink on Leaf, or units who were good at recovering HP reliably would be more valuable, and it could create design space to make new units or skills that encourage that type of gameplay. Grand Conquest. Oh man, I love Grand Conquest. It is an amazing game mode that honestly has a ridiculous amount of potential that IS doesn't make use of at all. This is the game mode that has a ton of design space available, and IS doesn't use any of it, which is beyond disappointing. This mode isn't a failure to create design space so much as it is a testimony to intelligent systems being unable to make use of that design space. Next, this is the section where we talk about the newer game modes and why they are failures when it comes to creating design space. First, let's discuss Allegiance Battles. So Allegiance Battles is a very unique game mode that requires the use of pair-up legendaries in order to score optimally. This could have opened up game design space if the options to succeed weren't already so prevalent in the game, such as Gale Force. Also, the fact that new pair-up mechanic was tied to an older unit type, like Legendary Heroes, which meant it didn't push players to get heroes specifically for this game mode. Players were already going to get Legendary Heroes for modes like Arena and for scoring, so this didn't add anything new design space wise as much as it reinforced the value of old unit types. Mjolnir Strikes is in a similar position, where instead of creating design space for new unit types or new skills, instead it just reinforced the value of merges on mythic heroes. Mjolnir Strikes is a game mode that is quite unique, but because of some bad design choices in my opinion, the game is way too easy. In particular, the choice to add a unit who can attack for free in the top area makes the game mode boringly easy. I don't think people even upgrade their buildings anymore because the game mode is such a snore. Roker Siege is once again a completely unique game mode that revolves around fighting boss power characters with unique scoring mechanics. This game mode had so much potential, but Intelligent Systems didn't expand on it enough, or add enough depth to it to open up new design space. They needed to make the game mode more difficult, or add additional objectives. Possibly objectives that could weaken the boss temporarily, or could do massive damage to it. As it is, it's so easy that people don't need anything outside their existing toolbox to easily obtain max rewards. So there is no value in creating characters who do well in this game mode, or designing skills that can help players succeed. So Pawns of Loki is completely different than anything else in the game, and it had the potential to open up design space. The scoring system is unique as it focuses on HP instead of unit deaths like in other game modes, and the game mode's combat system is automated, so it's less about planning out strategies move to move, but understanding team compositions and unit placement. With more emphasis on the game mode, it could have opened design space for units that did well at restoring HP, supporting allies, or other things. But in all honesty, the game mode was largely killed by save skills. Save skills are just way too powerful in this game mode and trivialize the strategy, and therefore remove the value of creating units or skills that could perform well in this game mode. Next, we have what I consider the biggest failure of a game mode when it comes to creating design space: Resonant Battles. Now, it was very obvious that Intelligent Systems designed this game mode for the sake of creating design space. First of all, they introduced Harmonic Heroes, a new unit type that directly impacted scoring. Second of all, they disabled things like Gale Force for the most part. They attempted to remove Wings of Mercy plays via the healing you receive from defeating units. Third, the game mode was originally quite difficult. The units had absurd stats, and there were limited attempts per week. These were all things Intelligent Systems deliberately created to open design space for the game mode. Their goal was to make the game mode so challenging that players would need the new harmonic units and possibly new skills to succeed. Now obviously, this completely failed. They had to nerf the game mode, remove the limited attempts, and for the most part, no one cares about merging harmonic units for scoring. Now the reason for this, in my opinion, is that the game mode is poorly designed. It lacks the depth of a game mode like Ether Raids and tries to cover up that lack of depth by removing options from the player's toolkit and adding unnecessary restrictions for no reason. And it is for those reasons the game mode fell flat on its face. The last new game mode is Summoner Duels, and from a design perspective, let me emphasize that I think it succeeds in opening design space for new units and new skills. The point where it fails is in creating appeal. People hate this game mode with a burning passion, And because of that, even though design space has been successfully made, no one cares because they hate the game mode. And if people hate the game mode, they aren't going to summon for the units or skills that do well in that game mode. It's just that simple. So the point of all this analysis was to show that Intelligent Systems' consistent failures to open design space through new game modes have left them with very little room to design new unique units or skills that could exist alongside current units. So instead, they have to rely on building vertically, or in other words, power creeping existing units in order to sell new units, which is their goal as a company. Now, let's move on to the final subject of the video and the final reason why I believe power creep is so prevalent in Fire Emblem Heroes. And this is going to be extremely unpopular, so please do not try to burn me at the stake, but units are released way too often in Fire Emblem Heroes. That's right. The rate we get new characters is absolutely ridiculous and completely unhealthy for the game. To prove this, I'm going to show an example of a different gacha and compare it to Fire Emblem Heroes. So in Genshin Impact, a very popular new gacha, released on September 28th, 2020, so that is about 1 year and 6 months ago at the time of recording this video. In that time period, Genshin Impact has released 28 new characters, including Venti, who premiered on the first banner of the game. Now let's compare that to Fire Emblem Heroes. So in the exact same time period, Fire Emblem Heroes has released 218 units. That's right, 218 units. Now that is absurd. That is almost 8 times the amount released in Genshin in the same time period. So you can easily see now how Intelligent Systems can fill up that design space extremely quickly. It's difficult to make 218 units that are unique, and it's obvious Intelligent Systems have given up on trying to do that. A ton of units are released and they have similar stat lines to existing units, or they have no unique niche at all because they don't have a preference weapon. In my opinion, this is the biggest reason power creep is so prevalent in Fire Emblem Heroes. No matter how good you are at opening design space for new units, if you're releasing units at this insane rate, it's impossible to keep up. And we can obviously see that is exactly what happened. The game has been out for 5 years and we have 787 units available. It is impossible to have 787 units and have them all be unique, powerful, and not step on each other's toes. It's just not happening. In my very unpopular opinion, if we want power creep to stop, it would require releasing drastically less units per year. Now, do I want this to happen? No, not really. Do I think this will happen? Absolutely not. Releasing new units is how Intelligent Systems make their money, and there's no way they are going to make any decisions that hurt their profits, even if it is better for the game. So the last question is, if we can't stop power creep, how do we slow it down? And hopefully I answered that question in this long discussion. Intelligent Systems needs to open up design space. And I would argue one of the best ways to do that is a new, popular, fun, replayable, challenging game mode that focuses on PvE over PvP. Now obviously that is a topic for another video, as this one has already been going on for a long time. This has been the FEH Report. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I'd love to hear your opinion about power creep, design space, the rate of units being released, and everything else I went over in this video. One of the best things we can do for the game is to discuss its problems and try to propose solutions so that maybe Intelligent Systems will listen to the community. So make sure to make your voice heard. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and it keeps the content coming. This has been Oblivion, and I'll catch you all later for more Fire Emblem Heroes.